Hello, and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly program where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. The standard disclaimer applies. The thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us, send questions or comments to our Twitter page at Mason Roundtable or on the Facebook event page for episode 185, Help a Brother Out. As usual, my name is John Ruark, past master of the Patriot Lodge number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia. And tonight we have Juan, Ham, and RJ. Starting with Juan, introduce yourself, please.
Hello, everybody. Juan Sepulveda here from Orange Blossom Lodge number 80 in Kissimmee, Florida, and the host of the Winding Stairs Freemasonry podcast.
Thank you, Juan.
Good evening.
Mike the intern.
Hey, Mike the intern here from Village Lodge number 274 in Burton, Ohio, Lodge Education Officer and Junior Steward.
Thank you, Mike. Last but not least tonight, Roberto Johnson.
Very nice. Robert Johnson from Waukegan Lodge number 78 in Waukegan, Illinois, past master, current sitting secretary, and host of Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast. Thanks.
All right, good stuff. Let's get into this week's topic, Masonic news being light this week. Sometimes no news is good news. So with that, we'll get right into a topic near and dear to many of the hosts' heart, which is charity. More specifically, what is the role of charity in our fraternity? And so we wanted to kind of cover that topic in both breadth and depth. And if I'll let Juan kind of kick us off into what his thoughts and musings were that sparked this topic for this week. So Juan, take it away.
And unmuted. Well, the idea for this topic came from thinking about being charitable. Of course, as you may know, our country has gone through several disasters recently, some mass shootings, and also we've had earthquakes in Mexico, hurricane in Puerto Rico, and all of these touch us in a direct and indirect way. And there's such a thing as charity fatigue, or there's a fatigue for this sort of thing. As a point, I'll ask you if you had thought today about what happened in Vegas. Did it cross your mind? Did you think about the families, the people recovering? Have you thought today about the people that went through the earthquake in Mexico or the hurricane through the Caribbean? And it is, at the moment of news, it's something that is right on the top of our minds. All other things take second place, but we tend to become desensitized to charity. Now, the discussion that I was interested in having today is more of what the role of charity is in Freemasonry. As human beings, we are moved by the necessities of other people, but what is the specific call to action that we have as Masons in regards to charity? And does it supersede other areas of Masonry? More specifically, and I'll start with my opinion, it is important that we are charitable as an organization, and I do believe that we should do everything possible to reach out and help people in need. However, this organization is meant to take men and transform them so that they could be effective in helping and transforming others. So if we treat Freemasonry as a triage room for community service, then in my opinion, we're doing it wrong. I think that there is a deeper involvement that has to be engaged with the individual before he is ready to go out and represent Freemasonry in the world.
So let me jump in on that, because you bring up a good point of the perception of Freemasonry and its charitable aspects. And so I guess to start at the beginning, I think that I was sold a different bill of goods than what I got out of Masonry. And so one of the things that I was talking with my Mason that I knew, right, to be one, ask one, I had lunch with him after I asked, and he kind of said, oh, the Masons are great. We do lots of charity work. Our lodges have done specific things for food drives and car washes and those kind of things. We've also done anonymous donations to families in need in the local area. And oh, by the way, we have these things called the Shriners Hospitals, which are great, right? Masons give to that. And by the way, to be a Shriner, you have to be a Mason first. So these were all the things that I was sold as what comes in the package of Freemasonry. When you get home, open the box of Freemasonry. Part of that is you're part of a charitable organization, and you're supposed to, participate in those activities. And so by proxy, you're a better person. You're more you're a community steward at that point. And so that when I got into Masonry, I found something completely different. I mean, in the sense of we still do those things, but as far as what the expectation was from the outside, looking outside in and now looking inside out, I have a different perspective of what that is supposed to be. What are your thoughts there, Mike, being the newest Master Mason in the group?
Yeah, back to that same thing. That's exactly what I was told during the first phone call I had when I, asked about petitioning the lodge. They right away, yeah, we do charity. There's $2 million per day, and and then you could join the shrine and do more charity, and all this stuff. And I was like, oh, what about the conspiracies and things like that. But anyway, no, I mean, even this other lodge I'm looking to go plural with, they do a aluminum can drive where they're collecting aluminum to raise money for scholarships. It's all great stuff. But again, it's back to what is it that we are all. I mean, are we all about charity? I realize that in some of what we learn about, it's why do we become a Mason? In order to help orphans, children, widows.
Robert, why can't we just do that through our church, or just by dropping off a couple dollars at the Salvation Army booth when they're ringing the bells?
You can.
What?
Yeah.
Why am I a Mason then? That makes no sense.
Yeah, that's what I guess that's the big deal, right? I mean, when I first petitioned, I did a lot of my homework. Again, I wasn't exposed to Masonry through friends or through good works. I didn't see them in the community, nothing. I saw them in a book of tapestries given to me by a really great friend and brother of mine, not a Masonic brother, Yukitaro Hamada, who's an incredible artist. He handed me this book of tapestries. I checked it out. I loved it. I said, what the hell is this? And I did my research. And when I finally petitioned a lodge, like 5 years later, I felt like I knew then that Masonry was what I would define it as today. I won't get into that, but I will say that I gave the answers about why I wanted to join that I knew the brothers wanted to hear. Does that make sense? And my answers were like, well, why do you want to be a Mason? I said, well, I heard you guys were like charitable and stuff. Like my answers were along those lines, right? Because
check the box that you thought they were looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that is largely what this organization has seemed to feel that it is in the last 50, 60 years. I don't know what happened. Michael R. Pohl hits on this topic. I talk about it's our book of the year right now for Illinois, or it will be. And his book, the first chapter says, we need to decide what we are. Are we this social civic charity club, or are we making good men better through teaching them things? And so, yeah, my whole thing is we've talked about this in the past, and I think we've all agreed that charity is what our lodges really push toward. It's like what they feel defines them today. what defines lodge? What defines Freemasonry in 2017? Well, I think a lot of us younger members feel something different. But in the past 40 years, what defines Freemasonry to the public, to the members? And I think overall, it's just going to be the charity work.
Yeah.
So that's a good point. I mean, let me just do a quick poll of all the hosts here. Does your lodge do any sort of charity? Question mark. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Both of them.
Only when people ask.
Hey, that counts.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so that's just a quick broad brush sample. All of ours, including mine. Yep. They either contribute to blood drives and do things for the youth groups at a minimum, right? That's kind of the basic things that are anytime they get requested, they do those. But then there's the other extracurricular going above and beyond at the state or, other level as well.
Yeah. And I want to point out that, like, when we say that, especially when I say that we need to focus on what we need to do, and just like Robert was saying, we don't say throw away charity, forget about contributing to other causes, forget people who need, let's just focus on making good man better. That's not the point. There needs to be a better equilibrium in the whole equation. There needs to be some shifting around so that some of the very important things that are driving people to join Masonry are provided to them. Otherwise, you have people that are joining, like you said, are being sold a different bill of goods, and then when they actually cross the veil, they realize, like, hey, surprise, we do none of that.
Well, so to your point, Juan, like, we've heard it before, and it's been mentioned in papers, and I think it's a really good idea, and it's something that stuck with me in the last year, is that charity is a byproduct of Freemasonry and not Freemasonry. So and what you just said is interesting, because we're selling guys this idea, but we have to be really careful about this, because Masonry as it stands has been built over the last however many years as this charitable organization. Like, when you tell if you ask people about Masonry, if they know about Masonry, if the general public realizes it's still a thing or whatever, if they even know about it, they think it's a charity organization or whatever. Yeah. And I think that's a problem. I get guys that come to our lodge to inquire about Masonry, and then, like, would I get scolded? Would I be a bad Mason if I said, if you're just looking for a charitable organization, this isn't it? So I would check out the Lions or Rotary or something else. Like, if I were to say that, I haven't, but if I did, does that make me a bad dude?
I don't think so. I think it's perfectly fine. I think people sometimes believe that, like I've said before, that courtesy and courage, they're mutually exclusive. You can be courageous and say what needs to be said and not be a jerk about it.
Yeah. And I think that's my thing, is, like, I would explain, it's like, listen, my good friend Dan Gentry he actually used to ask the guys, why are you here? And they'd say, well, I heard you guys were really charitable. He's like, you know who else is super charitable? Like, everybody else. So and they're like, well, and he would keep going until they would break through the veil, right? And be like, I'm interested in the esoteric and philosophies. And he's like, all right, here's a petition.
But yeah, because what sets us apart from everyone else?
Well, that's what's supposed to set us apart. Mm-hmm. But then I want to ask, like, the flip side of that is, if we start adopting this idea that we need to tell people that charity is not like the thing that defines us. What defines us is our character, our moral value, our knowledge of the philosophies. That is what I feel should define us.
Right.
But that's what I feel.
Yeah.
So what I'm thinking, to kind of put a weird metaphor on top of this. Okay, so imagine if Masonry were like an Xbox, right? So guess what? We bought it because it's a gaming system. I get to play games on it. But then when you open it up, plug it in, and hook it to the internet, like, wow, this thing can also play Blu-ray DVDs. This thing can also stream Netflix. This thing can also has a web browser. This thing can also take pictures with the camera. Like, I didn't know it did all that other cool stuff. And by the way, I bought it because it's a gaming system, because it was what it was sold, but now I'm finding different uses for it based off of my experience with it and the other features that are inherently built in that just haven't been overtly sold. So are we, from a marketing standpoint, having an imbalance of what we're selling Freemasonry as? Because we could say, as part of our value proposition, Masonry is a leadership course. Masonry is a philosophy. Masonry is a path to, discovering how to be a better person on earth. Just all these different things that are truly valid in their own right, but we default to the easy one because we can see money changing hands, right? We can see the seen, we can't see the unseen.
But
right, and the weird part with that is that because we've become better men and all that, simply because of the education we've gotten, is the reason more or less that we're charitable, not that we're charitable, oh, and we do these other things.
Yeah. And I really want to validate your metaphor, John, especially because I have an Xbox One. And when we got it for Christmas, I think last year for the boys. And I bought it because it was a capable, top of the line gaming system. Christmas morning, I spent a good 2-3 hours not playing, updating drivers, opening up username accounts, doing all kinds of, like, I had to go to my email and check the security code and come back and make a password and updating the controllers. And it's very similar to what some people go through. They join Masonry thinking, oh, there's all this esoteric, and then the first experiences they have is all this protocol and all this,
I gotta ask.
That's a good point.
I gotta ask. In my neck of the woods, it's a lot of, I'm in this for the charity and the social stuff, and then like esoterics is almost seen as like weird. And earlier when I told you that I gave them the answers I knew that they wanted to hear, it's because I knew if I said, I want to feel like I want to go through an initiatic experience, nobody's going to kick me out into the woods and reward me when I come back with a bear skin. So what can I do in 2008 that is the modern day men's equivalent in a civilized society, and how am I going to like learn to understand the golden verses of Pythagoras? Like, that's what I want to know. But if I said any of that, they'd have been like, yeah, this guy's weird. No. Right? I mean, so when you talk about the Xbox, I think like the selling point is it's a video game system. And in my neck of the woods, it's a charity. And then like the peripheral stuff is all like this other little stuff, right? But that's totally in my mind is wrong. Like, I feel it should be, we are the prime example of an educational, moral, philosophical system, and we educate dudes. And by the way, like, when we're not racking our brains and scotch and cigars and speaking about philosophy, we're packing backpacks for underprivileged kids or whatever.
Dude, that would be really cool. Like, just because of the way you flip the conversation around. If I don't know if some of you are familiar with like split marketing and stuff like that, where you could do like A/B tests.
Mm-hmm.
And like, if there was, let's just say hypothetically, a progressive Grand Lodge that would say, hey, you know what we're going to do in our state? We're going to try different flavored ads and measure the effectiveness of each of those ads, the response rate, the click-through rate, and then eventually the petition and initiatic experience rate.
Huh.
and trace that all the way through from a marketing campaign. And you could say, hey, out of these 5 different flavors where this ad we targeted the charitable aspect, this ad we targeted the esoteric aspect, this ad we talked about the social aspect, and just to see what cohort of candidates came through that way. I mean, that's a data-driven decision. You know me. That sounds exciting.
That does sound exciting. Yeah,
Wait,
I have to agree with you
track
there.
that all the way through.
I gotta say, there's probably like we could probably get the analytics from any Grand Lodge. Well, I guess that we'd have to. I'm supposing that they have a thing on their petition that says, "Where did you hear about us?"
Yeah, but if no one looks at it or reads it, like,
Right.
what's the? I think California, Pennsylvania, I think they might, that seems like something that they could do, they would do. I don't know. I don't want to speak negatively about other jurisdictions, but they seem progressive enough in their reach out that they would be open to do that. But going back to the component of like, why do we present it like that? And if I'm not mistaken, in order for us to hold the 501c3, it has to be we're categorized as an educational, and I don't know if it mentions charitable or not, but I know education is a main component of it.
Mm-hmm.
And if we, like, I've even heard the whole thing, like, this has to happen in meetings, otherwise we could lose our
Let's talk tax code real quick, if you know it. In Virginia, fraternal organizations are classified as 501c10. So that is specifically for fraternal organizations, which are nonprofit, but not in the sense of you can write them off for taxes, but in the sense that all profits go back into the fraternal system that's there to help out the brothers who give the charities, but it's all kind of self-contained, right? And so we do have those tax status. I don't know if that's the same for other states. I don't know if you'd have that information right offhand, but I do know.
Ohio's Grand Lodge is they're allowed to take donations that are tax deductible. However, each individual lodge is not. I don't remember the 50C code on that, but that is exactly the way it is for us. We are not allowed to we're not allowed to advertise that it's tax deductible because it is not.
Do you know, Robert? TDGM?
Yeah, we are a 501c10, I believe. I used to say we were a C3, and then somebody corrected me. I think my old secretary, actually. And so I believe it's the same thing. Not a real tax break per se. We do get some tax breaks stemming from our code, which does not allow raffles, and a provision about alcohol not being served during an official Masonic meeting. So that allows us some property tax like breaks.
Oh, okay.
Which is cool. Like we only pay $1,500 for our taxes for the building. Scott Duvall, his building is in Wheeling, and they have to pay like $10,000 to $12,000 for taxes, and they have the same break we do to percentage. So it helps in some areas, and in some areas it doesn't. So I don't know that the idea of how charity is used in lodges, or if that actually has an effect on the tax code. But I think it's, as you said, John, 501c10 is the way that kind of works.
Florida is 501c3.
Wow. That's what I was hoping to hear, something different. That's really fascinating.
Yeah, I'm trying to look here to see what the requirements are when it comes to it, but this document is too large for me to pinpoint it right off the bat. But I know that we've had discussions with some officers about this, about the fact that there has to be a component of education, otherwise we could compromise the the status itself. And I'm almost convinced that charity is part of it, but
Dude, that's brilliant though. That might be the way we get education back in lodges, is to say,
Yeah.
we're gonna pull your tax
you don't
down.
want to
You better get a presenter to come talk.
So yeah, this may be of interest. So in Illinois, we actually have two things. We have a 501c8 and a 501c10. A 501c8 is where there are benefits such as life insurance, sick or accidental benefits. It's a fraternal society with benefits. And then the C10 are those that do not provide benefits but donate their proceeds to charity. Domestic fraternal societies generally smaller since they do not maintain substantive benefit programs. Yada, yada, yada. So kind of interesting. I bet our listeners this evening didn't think that they would get a lesson in Illinois tax code, but that's kind of cool.
So I think the next logical discussion point is, so what is the role of charity in the fraternity today? Let's talk and get out of, what should it be, what shouldn't it be, the philosophy behind that. But given where Masonry stands in its charitable giving, its local and macro levels of charitable giving, is that something that it should still continue?
Yeah. And that, excuse me, that is why I was leaning towards the title, Help a Brother Out, because I wanted to focus on the aspect of that internal charity where you have alimony, where you have this focus on making sure that you're helping one another achieve that level of that self-actualization. And I wanted to mention a quote that I'm very fond of by Dr. Wayne Dyer, where he says, "You cannot be sick enough to help a person who is sick." And I know I butcher that quote, but that's part of my job, to butcher quotes. But it is true. If you think about it, the best person, like, you don't want your doctor to be sick. You don't want your dentist to have like the messed up gums and crooked teeth. Like, you want to be in the best position to be able to help people out of the situation in which they are in which they're in. Just scraping by to just give $100 to this charity, scraping by and giving 2 hours of assistance to another, it's not the optimal situation. I think there is a lot of potential left on the table. If you take, going back to, we've had this discussion before, being an exclusive fraternity, and some people get turned off by that. They hate the elite. What is it? Elitism. El elitismo. Okay. Google it. But it is true. Like, we try to choose people that are good. It's not our job to take someone who is, morally bankrupt, who is, financially destitute. That's not the focus of this organization. Is to take good men and help them basically streamline their progress to become the best version of themselves. And if we were to actually take to heart that structure and focus on helping those men who come in, who have an incredible potential, and teach them the lessons that we find in the trivium and the quadrivium, that we find in the different lessons of Masonry, if we can help them become the best version that of themselves, then we will have more flexibility to actually contribute, not just $100, $1,000, to be able to save that lodge that is being sold to a profane, to be able to really take a community who is in peril. For example, some of these communities that have been affected by natural disasters. We could come in and really make a difference, as opposed to just like giving whatever little is left. So help a brother out. Focus on getting better. Focus on getting your people better, so that we can really make a difference out there.
Well, there you go.
That's all I got to say about that.
It's interesting. You touched on a few items in there where it made me think of this idea, and I'm going to circle around here a little bit, but I posted a meme in our in the event page, and it says something about the mistranslation of charity, and maybe equating charity to money. And the way I feel about it is I expressed this view in a video I did. Like when I first started the podcast, I was making some shorts, with just stock footage or whatever. And one of them was called A Nation of Builders. And it was like, every day Masons go out there and they're helping people. But yeah, there's a lot of guys just writing checks and tossing checks around, right? Like you can buy honoraries with checks, okay? But the thing is, a lot of us are out there helping not with checks. I mean, we're helping with our hands. A good friend of mine, Ishmael Rosa, we had all this flooding in Lake County, Illinois, months ago. And who do I see on TV sandbagging in the community with his gym? Like, he's out there. Like, and he's not wearing masonry. He's out there with his gym brothers, like, and his sisters from his gym, like, sandbagging, right? Like that's, to me, the charity that we need, like community assistance. And I think it has a real purpose, because what we're doing is we're going out there, and there is some aspect to charity making you a better person. And it's not by writing a check. It's by getting out there and getting uncomfortable. When you get out there and when you're at the soup kitchen, or when you're at, like, I love Feed My Starving Children, right? But let's be honest, it's light charity work. I mean, you don't have to face anybody. You're going with your friends, you're having a good time, and you're packing some food. It's great. But when you get out there and you're helping actual homeless people, when you're passing out blankets, when you are, when you have your register in your hand and you're helping heroin addicts and you're passing out clean needles, okay, that is what's making you a better person, because now all of a sudden you're understanding how other people live. And that understanding, I think, comes back to the Latin version of love. Like there's like a bazillion loves in Latin, right? There's eros, which hopefully you enjoy with your significant others. There's mania. We talk about agape, which is huge in Masonry. And then there's storge, which is really what I want to focus on. It's this familiarity love, this love of your fellows, enjoying each other's company. That's really what it's about, is storge, not agape. That's like this altruistic God's love. You can't even do that. Storge, I think, is where we are. And Scott Duball made this excellent paper that maybe you guys will get to read someday in Miscellanea in the AMD book. But he talks about storge and how that's really it. And Sam Land, a guy who wrote a few articles for us on the Midnight Freemasons, wrote a series called What is Brotherly Love? And he touches on this also. And so I think, like, we make ourselves better, and we start to understand this idea of storge, this friendship, this like bond between actual people, no matter your stations in life. And this understanding is what, like, kind of builds you and makes you a better person, is your understanding. Like, no more are you like living by, where once you may have laughed at a joke about stereotypes, somebody may have told you like a racist joke and you may have chuckled. Now you get to a point in your life where you don't even get it. Like, that's the goal, I think. Like, you want to understand and be around and understand the people in your life and have this storge love, this kind of fellowship with everybody. And that's, to me, what makes you better.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the elements that makes you better.
I wanted to mention, like, you mentioned those, and I've seen some of those distinctions being made in our group and different discussions. But if you boil it down to like basic economics, you have a limited amount of resources, whether it is attention, whether it is patience, whether it is kindness, whether it is compassion, and all of these things, you need to have a surplus of them in order to be able to put them in the hands of someone outside of you. So whether it's agape or if it's eros or if it's the third one that you mentioned, they all they're all in that basic description. They're all the same. For example, we were going to talk about eros. You have to be comfortable with yourself. You need to love yourself enough in order for you to engage in a romantic relationship with another person and give yourself to that other person. That giving happens only when you're comfortable enough with yourself. And the same thing goes with that fraternal bond. If you're un antipático, if you're just antipático is a guy that's, is a jerk and it's always, pessimistic. He has some growth that he could achieve through the lessons that we provide in the fraternity, and then condition him to be more able to connect with the other people. So I think we're leaving a lot of that potential on the table, and it applies to all those descriptions of love or caritas or charity and all of that, because you need to be, you're the point from which it begins. And until that point develops enough to encompass a circumference around it, then there's nothing to give. So that's why my point is, like, men have to be developed in order for them to be of any good to anyone outside of that point and the circle.
And I've seen, like in, my lodges, I've seen it both ways. I mean, we have, obviously the lodge itself, giving charity. But I know, like in one of my lodges, we have a brother who, his version of charity is probably spot on with what we're talking about here. This man spends 2 days a week hanging out with an elderly brother who could not get out of he's in a nursing home, couldn't get out to the public. He spends 2 days every week with this man. He also, there's another brother who would have difficulty mowing his own lawn, so this man goes over and does it. These aren't things like that he advertises. It's that other brothers have noticed this and talked about it. And yet, I mean, that's the kind of charity we're talking about that we're supposed to be doing. More than this, I mean, the public stuff is nice, and it is. It's good because it helps our public image, and it should be a byproduct of what we do. But on the other hand, it should not be the core focus of everything. And the two lodges I belong to, they don't seem to core focus on that as much. They mention it, they talk about it. Every year we Village Lodge has the breakfast booth at the fairgrounds, and they make sure, I mean, the huge portion of that goes to the king and queen of the fair, but it's a scholarship fund really for them. And then we also take care of, I want to say 1 or 2 schools for after proms. We also do same thing with that money. There's also scholarship funds, and then that same money applies to, when the Grand Lodge asks for it, of course, the Special Olympics, and so forth. But I mean, that's, that last piece is really just the public face, really big public face. The other stuff is we just, we help out the after proms because we want to, not because it even gets advertised.
Do you think, Mike, that some of our charity, like the public will see us out there and they see us raising money or doing pancake breakfasts, and of course there's a lot of lodges out there that say things like, well, our lodge would go under if it wasn't for the pancake breakfast. And in those instances where, like, it's almost a reverse charity where the public is giving to us to stay alive. But it sounds like what your lodge is at least doing is, when they're doing these things, they're pouring that money back into the community.
And that's what they're doing. Yeah.
And so, like, if your lodge is going to do charity like that, and they're going to write checks, to me, like the best thing you can do is to make sure it goes back into the local community. So I love that, actually.
Yeah, and that, that I like too. But like I was saying, I would like to see a lot more brothers doing things like, visiting the shut-ins and helping brothers out that have physical disabilities that may not be, and I don't want to say somebody who's been lifelong physical disability necessarily, but someone who may have just recently come up with disability, or he's elderly and can't mow the lawn, things like that. I mean, these kinds of things that the one brother I'm talking about does. I mean, that I admire, because that's another piece of it. That's an individual just going out and being brotherly, and he could do that for anyone in the community. But another thing I was thinking of as you were, I think it was you talking about it. It was actually Juan with the communities with the in Mexico and Texas and Puerto Rico. Another side to our charity should be our leadership skills, that we know, how to lead things and go out and participate in helping these cleanups and leading groups of people to work with the community to get these jobs done. Just a thought there. I think that's kind of another form of charity as well.
That's really deep, because up until you said that, I was going to say the last 10 minutes really could be summarized as compassion, right? Compassion for your fellow man. And I think, wow, the way you epitomize that with the final statement of leadership itself could be an external manifestation of compassion. So that's fantastic. That really blew my mind. So thank you for that, Mike.
Sure.
Let's shift over to some anecdotes we have on the Facebook page. Nathan Rolfson mentions that in one lodge he was a member of, there was one member that was not financially sound, and others would pay for his degree fees and dues. After a while, the brethren got tired of him always requesting money, and that person is no longer a member of the fraternity. How do you guys feel about that? That we're supposed to look out for each other, but how much is enough to start supporting a guy for his dues and involvement in Masonry?
I mean, yeah, that starts off with, the remit, possibilities when you can't afford your dues. But in my opinion, that usually falls under, hey guys, I just lost my job and I should have one in a few months, but, right now I can't, and they remit the dues. But if they paid his degrees and all that stuff, I mean, they started off on the wrong foot. That's my opinion there. Because if he couldn't afford those and then couldn't afford his dues, they knew what they were getting into.
Yeah. And I think not necessarily in Masonry, this is not an experience that I've had too much to deal with in Masonry, but in real life. Sometimes the result of that inability to actually meet your obligations and sustain yourself. Sometimes, I'm not saying every time, but sometimes it is either bad habits or it's squandering resources. So you might have not, helping the person financially by just giving them money. It's not necessarily the best help you can give them. Sometimes just a little whack in the tush and letting them know it's like, look, sit down here with this man. This man has been doing what you're doing efficiently. Look how he does it. And the help that you give someone is not always monetary. You can actually have someone and teach them how to better market their business or how to better streamline their operation. And if, a lot of this stuff also blends into the lessons of Masonry. You go into the very basics. And I was asking yesterday, I had the privilege of visiting my brothers up in Claremont Lodge, number 226. And thank you to Brother Alan Heist. And actually, we had our past Grand Master there, Most Worshipful Dale Gehring. And one of the things that we were talking about was the fact that you have to, sometimes really connect these people. You have someone who is successful in marketing, and then you have another brother who is just struggling. He has a good product and he has good intentions, but he just is not good at marketing. part of what we can do for them is to and be sincere. It's like, listen, yeah, you just suck at color and composition. Just get a partner, but you need to have those connections being made, not just handing people out something.
So that's a good segue into the next comment from Donnie Dillon, who, when you're looking for all of life's answers, what do? You go to Google, and he Googled the term charity, and the textbook or the dictionary definition, while definitions 1 and 2 have to do with organizations to provide and help raise money, and the voluntarily giving of help, typically in the form of money, the third definition says charity could just be kindness and tolerance in judging others. And in fact, it goes on to say that the archaic form of charity is the love of humankind, typically in a Christian context. So the point Donnie was making there by highlighting the latter definitions is to say that he proposes that true Masonic charity has very little to do with money.
Don't tell all the Freemasons that.
You better start getting a new selling campaign, because you can't use that line anymore. Well, we're a charity.
Yeah.
That's one of our Masonic secrets.
Well, I'm just, look, I mean, you can't be about charity when we have the issues we have. So, it's pretty hypocritical.
Which is actually a good segue to the next comment from Michael Overturf, who says, flat out, we have become a social club, which has drifted away from the pure principles of the Institute. The roles of the past highlight that these men became leaders in their churches and communities because of their membership in the fraternity.
That's my boy, Mike. He's on the EDU committee here with me. So
calls it like he sees it.
Yeah, and he's like, he gets it, and he's a newer Mason. He's a newer Master Mason, and he's done a lot. He's like Mike. He's in a lot of the orgs, and he's got fresh eyes, and he kind of just, he sees it and he gets it. So yeah, I agree, Mike.
So I think the last comment worth mentioning is a good turn of a question, which says, back again to Nathan Rollifson, while many Freemasons sell only the charitable aspect of Freemasonry, it's much harder to sell men on an organization that specifically helps you improve internally yourself. That's not a church, a school, or the Boy Scouts. So a lot of men could benefit from Freemasonry's lessons, but they need to learn that they need Freemasonry to become better men, right? It's harder to sell a self-help program, as it were, instead of saying, we're a charity, we're a bunch of guys that get together, we have dinner once a month. It's we're fraternity.
So much easier to say.
Right. Not like you're gonna have to do some hard work once you get in the door. You're really gonna have to go look upon yourself, face your inner demons. Welcome to the club. It's much harder.
I know, like, you and I geek out on this a little bit, but like, that's kind of marketing a little bit. And I don't, Mike, go ahead and what, I don't want to cut you off. Finish your thought. I was gonna ask Juan, like, what's the deal there? Like, why do we just go with the easy, it's a charity? Like, why do we do that instead of market it as something else? Like, why do you think? You're into marketing. I know John and I get off on the data, but like, from that kind of perspective, what do you think?
You see, I just don't see it necessarily as a marketing effort. Like, marketing efforts in Masonry are few and far between, and they, not always well informed. And I suspect that it has something to do with the public image that you want to present. And you mentioned something earlier that it reminded me of one night I was in lodge after I think it was a fellow craft degree. And one of the brothers that I respected the most, he was very well informed. He's actually a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Mason. And like, we looked up to this man because he was just a wealth of knowledge. And he approached me. We were talking, and he said, "You know what you see happen here in this section, it's very different and I think he mentioned Louisiana." And I'm like, "Okay, tell me more. How different is it?" And he said that it's very esoteric, and he made it sound like it was almost like forbidden, you know, like the fact that it was more esoteric and it was more in depth and introspective. That was, ooh, can't tell you, it's like a dirty secret. It's like, it shouldn't be like, this is like, let's embrace that. There are some things that you want to get in touch with when it comes to getting to know yourself and getting to know the universe, basically. And it shouldn't be a mystery. It shouldn't be a taboo. Even it could be a mystery, but it doesn't have to be a taboo. So I see it almost as the effort to shy away from that taboo and almost present themselves more in a, okay, well, no, we're leaders in charity and we are actually out there contributing to the community as a selling point. But like, I'm sure all of you would have been sold more if it was the reverse that was offered. It's like, you know what? You come in here, we're going to show you some dark S. It's going to blow your mind. It's going to make you think about stuff you never considered before. It's going to change you.
So to that point, RJ, I love your selling point. Go ahead and repeat it again about when guys come up to you and how you give them your card.
Oh, yeah. So my other business card that I have when they ask it's just a white card, and on the front it has a square and compass, and there's no G in it or anything, just square and compass, and on the back it has my phone number, and it just says, "Call me when you want to change the world." And I stole that from Steve Jobs when he talked to one of the high ups at Pepsi when he wanted her to come work for Apple, and he said, "Are you ready to change the world yet?" And she said, "Yeah," and they did. Say what you want, like, yeah, maybe Steve Jobs was a jerk or whatever. But I get calls when I do that, and I get candidates, and those candidates, I typically will try to mentor, and I give them access to me 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Like, that's who I am and what I do, and that's the dedication that I think we all have to, Freemasonry is promoting this thing that is an educational society that, well, we got some charity too. It's necessary, I think, to a point. But yeah.
Okay. So I think that meets our time for tonight. Let's go around real quick and start with Mike, the intern, for final thoughts.
So, back to our, quickly on our statement about why do we not market it, why do we market charity rather than the other stuff? I'll be honest. I think we've actually forgotten how to describe Masonry to new people, and that just becomes the easiest thing to say is, and it's easy to say, man, we hang out together and we raise money and, we give it to this and we make pancake breakfasts and, that's easy. It's a lot harder to sit there and say, well, we it's an well, you guys know how we teach everybody
System of morality,
that's it.
Allegory, and illustrated by symbols. Yeah,
that's it.
I love
it. I mean, try and tell them that, and the guy's going to go, "It's a what?" So, they're first walking through the door, and that's what you tell them, But yeah, back to that. I really think that's what's happened. I think we've forgotten how to describe it in a way that makes a person understand that it's the system of morality is veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols, but how to say that so that they actually get every piece,
Mm-hmm.
So that's my opinion at this point.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Robert.
So to touch on exactly what Mike just said, it's easy to say that, and I almost wonder if it's a fear that we're going to lose somebody. Like if we if we say something like that, like, oh no, don't tell them that stuff. Tell them what they know so that they join and they can discover that stuff later, but never do. Like it's kind of a fear tactic. I almost wonder, like, are we just so scared of not having new members that we say the easy stuff that, you know, you can identify with readily? Like, how many guys did we lose? We say we were a charitable organization. That's not what they were looking for. And they just left. Like, it's like, I'm out. I'm going to Golden Dawn. I'm going to OTO to eat crackers. Yeah, man. I mean, I wonder, but, sorry, John.
That's hilarious.
So, yeah, last night we had this annual meeting at my lodge for election of officers, and I read the first chapter of Pohl's book. And I'm not going to lie, it was like taboo to read for 5 minutes in a lodge for education. Why does it feel like taboo? Like I can legally sell, like a dude can legally sell a firearm to a friend. And the way the world reports that stuff, you feel like a criminal. Just for doing the law-abiding thing, you feel like a criminal, like a dirtbag, because of like the way we're portrayed. But it's the same in lodge. Like if I want to bring education to the lodge, and if I speak for 5 minutes, oh my God, it's like, oh, can I do that? Should I do that? But you know, we can talk about giving to charity for 35 minutes and argue about how much money we're going to do for scholarships for an hour and a half. Like, that's cool. But I digress, man. Like, I love charity. I really do. But I love using my hands and I love getting out there and helping guys. And it might not be because they're poor. It might not be because of whatever. I had guys the other day, a great friend of mine, Kirk Preston, ran across a friend of his from grade school who was a Mason, and it turns out the guy was in town because his dad had a heart attack, and his dad's not even a Mason, but he was going to go back home, and he's going to be living in this house that maybe not so clean. So Kirk was like, what if I get a bunch of brothers together and we clean your dad's house before he comes home? Dude was like almost in tears. And they went and did this for a guy who's not even an Illinois Mason, but he's a bro. Like, that's charity, man. That's amazing. So Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, Kirk and the boys were down at this guy's house cleaning it out. Like, that's awesome. So that's the kind of charity that I think is really worthwhile. And if we're going to market it like that, because nothing is more hardcore than actually doing it. Like, anybody can write a check. Anybody. You're not special. Like, get out there and do it. But that's my charge to you. If you're listening and you want to go do something, go to the food kitchen, go do something that affects people and see how it affects them. And when you get affected and you're dishing out soup and you see some dude and you start to well up with tears or whatever, like, then you know you did it. You did it. You did exactly what you were, you know, what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to feel it. So thanks. I really enjoyed tonight's conversation. I was trying to circumscribe my passions about Masonic education becoming relegated to the corner over the charity. And I'm sorry if I went a little outside my bounds. But anyway, thanks for watching.
So let me get it straight. You like education?
Oh my God, I love it.
Good stuff. Thanks. RJ, what's Pulvina?
All right. Well, there's a lot to think about here. My wish is that this is not just sound that came out of the speakers of your car and entertained you on your commute, and that was it. I hope that it transcends that. It goes deeper and helps you consider what your role is in that whole equation of charity and education, and really putting forth the effort to make that experience real, to help people become better men and help yourself become a better man. Like, you know where your faults are. I know where my faults are, and I try pretty damn hard to be honest about them to myself, and take steps in the direction of becoming better. So I encourage you to do the same. Be critical about what what you're lacking, and take steps in the direction of using the tools that we've put in your hands to achieve it. Like, it doesn't have to be super complicated. It doesn't have to happen tomorrow. It's just little steps at a time, but they go in the general direction of improvement. And once you have opportunities and you feel that, my English eludes me, esa inquietud, when you feel that necessity to reach out and help someone. And sometimes it manifests itself just by inviting someone to lunch. You see someone is struggling in their relationship, and you take them out for a beer and give them an hour of respite. And that is something that it's also part of that whole charitable effort. So listen to that quiet voice that inclines you to be of influence to others. Don't shy away from it. And hopefully other people, when they feel it towards you, they don't shy away either. So thank you so much for listening. And my shameless plug has to do with part of my improvement as a man. I started a YouTube channel with my family a year or two ago, and we finally decided to really start making it real. So I need you guys to go to the Winding Stairs Freemasonry group and check out the link there. You can go to bit.ly. It's just too complicated. Just go to the Winding Stairs group and you'll find it. The YouTube channel is called Let's Go Do Something. So just search for that thing and you'll see some fun stuff. You'll see how I survived Hurricane Irma. You'll see how we went to Paris and London on the same day. So I won't tell you anymore. Just go check it out. Go to YouTube and search for Let's Go Do Something. Thank you, brothers.
Just do it. Which I was going to say, that's kind of the summary of what RJ's final thoughts were. Was the Nike motto: just do it. Just go out there and just do it. If you feel inclined, go do it. So I'm hearing that as a common theme. My final thoughts, really, I did a good job of subduing my passions and not mentioning how horribly mistranslated I feel the word charity is. If you want to hear my thoughts, go back to episode 103 when we walk through faith, hope, and charity, and how it's been lost through the annals of time. But as far as the practical modern use of charity, we've one thing from the compassion translation that I found myself improving on is compassion towards coworkers and being more aware, emotionally intelligent of what's going on around the office. I know that if I see someone is looking different, carries themselves a little different, I'm trying to be more sensitive to body language and really look into. I stop. If I see this, they're not themselves that day, I'll stop and I'll pull them aside or say, how are things going? You look like something's on your mind and you want to talk about it. That's not an act of donation. That's not an act of service. That is purely an act of one-to-one compassion. And that, to me, has been a growth area of mine and something I've been working on, something I've been focusing on. So it's been a very micro level, right? I'm not feeding the world, but if I can help one person feel better, have a better day, and you don't know what the impacts are, and I think it's by design. And so that's what I'm trying to do to improve my application of Masonic charity. So with that, this has been very enlightening. Thank you all for your commentary. Thank you all in the Facebook group for your thoughts and opinions and anecdotes. And thank everyone else for listening and watching, and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.